Hello guys and welcome back. With the NHL season slowly approaching here, I wanted to make my final standings predictions for every single team, seeing which team makes the playoffs and ultimately who wins the Stanley Cup in 2025. But what are my full predictions and do I see your team making the playoffs? Well, make sure you watch till the end as we go through every team here because we got a few surprises presented by BetUS, and make sure you watch till the end for all that and subscribe if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Now you guys know how this works. We're going to be going through every division first, going through each team and how many points I see them getting. And today we're going to start out with the Pacific Division. Now this division is going to be a weird one this year, but honestly at the very top, I don't see it being much of a contest. First place for the first time in a while, I think will finally be the Edmonton Oilers. And I think they're going to finish with 108 points. And it's for a lot of reasons. I think they're built especially for regular season success, if not playoff success, but because of the weapons they added in Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson, as well as I think some of the improvements on the defense with players like Ty Emberson, especially, I think being really under the radar additions. I think for the Oilers, they've rounded up pretty well and had themselves a heck of an offseason. But I think they will benefit from a really weak division this year with a lot of middle of the pack, and I think for the Oilers, they'll rise above just enough. And here's the thing, with this Pacific Division, I think there will only be 3 teams out of this division to make the playoffs this year. I think it's going to be an incredibly tight race. But at second place, this one actually surprised me quite a bit. At number 2, I have the Los Angeles Kings, and I see them getting 102 points by the end of the year. No, I don't think there's going to be much playoff success that comes out of this team, but I actually do quite like what they did this offseason. It wasn't revolutionary or anything, but they got rid of Pierre-Luc Dubois, which I think was addition by subtraction, and getting Darcy Kemper back. I think when healthy, he can be a starter quality player. You also got additions to the depth like Tanner Jeannot and Warren Foegele. Foegele especially, I think, will be a really under the radar add for them. And on the defense, it'll mostly be just the rise of the youth that will aid them in Brant Clark and Jordan Spence, hopefully getting more playing time than they have before. Again, I don't think this Kings team is set up for major playoff success or anything, and goal scoring I still think will be a little bit of a weakness, but I think regular season wise, they'll be just fine. And in, again, a division with a lot of middle of the pack, I think the Kings will just be good enough to get past that. Next up, we go on to number 3, and this spot to me is easily between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Vancouver Canucks. I think they will be battling it out for that last spot in the Pacific right to the very end. But to me at number 3, just barely, and this is some optimism on the goaltending front here, I'm going to have the Vancouver Canucks coming here 3rd place in the Pacific with 95 points. There's some pretty obvious reasons why I think Vancouver will decline just a bit in terms of points in the regular season. First, you got the goaltending health, which has been up in the air over the past couple months if Demko will be healthy for this season. It seems like he's battling something that he will be fine with having, but long-term will have some effects on him, so we'll see how that happens. Shelovs has proved to be a solid backup in the meantime, though, and hopefully he's somebody that can come up if Demko doesn't have the health that he wants. But I think outside of that, I really like the Jake DeBrusk addition this last offseason. You're going to see some regression, I think, in some of those top players like Brock Besser. I don't think they're going to have those career years again, but I think we'll see a similar trajectory for the Canucks, just barely getting in the playoffs, but still making it in the end, which is big for them. But it's once again going to be propelled by big seasons out of Quinn Hughes. I think we're going to see Pettersson bounce back a little bit and get back to the top center that I know he can be, and I think I'm optimistic on the Demko front, at least that he'll be healthy and good this season. Again, it seems like there might be some issues after this, but for this season, I think he'll be okay. Coming in 4th place right after that, of course, will have to be the Vegas Golden Knights. I see them being right on the cusp, right there with Vancouver, but ultimately getting 93 points in the end. I think people forget that last year in the race for the playoffs, Vegas was a threat to miss the playoffs potentially. St. Louis kind of floundered a little bit, and that created Vegas' playoff spot there in the end, but they were only 6 points out from missing, and considering the losses in the goaltending side like Logan Thompson, and especially up front, Jonathan Marchessault, Chandler Stevenson, 2 top and offensive pieces that Vegas left in free agency. You look at the wings, and it's a lot of maybes. Victor Olofsson, Pavel Dorofia, Brendan Brisson, Alexander Holtz. They're really hoping that these guys take big steps in their careers, and they need them to, or else the offense is going to be barren here. The defense will still be fantastic, and that will be the main strength this year, but I think goaltending-wise, you don't have Logan Thompson anymore, so you have less reliability as a backup behind him, and that could cause some problems in the future. But I just think there's too many maybes and too many weird things going on with this Vegas team to give them too much confidence, at least for me. Just behind Vegas in in the end, I think will be the Seattle Kraken. Now, I don't think they're going to be right behind them necessarily, but I think they'll finish around 85, 86 points. You obviously have the additions of Chandler Stevenson and Brandon Montour there in free agency. But you just look at this lineup, and I think it's a lot of solid. It's a lot of good, but I don't know if it's good enough to compete for a playoff spot. I think they will improve by a decent amount, but I think it's more of a transitional phase between when Seattle's top-end prospects really start becoming top-end players in this league. I think eventually they could be potential wildcard contenders, but I think their slip back into mediocrity last year is more of what we'll see in the future. At number 6, this is where the Anaheim Ducks are going to land, and personally, I see them getting a healthy raise between the last couple of seasons, jumping up to 76 points. They're not going to be making the playoffs anytime soon, but I think Anaheim does take a jump almost because they have to. It would be insane if they didn't. They have some additions there throughout the lineup, like Cutter Gauthier, of course, which is the big one, but also Robbie Fabry on the defense, Brian Dumoulin. But I think the improvements will mostly just be because of those younger players playing full-time in Mintyukov and Zellweger, but also Dostal getting more consistent. And I think the top-end players and guys like Zegras especially getting a lot more health under them. That, to me, I think is the biggest thing. Keep this core together, keep the health there for the younger players, and I think for Anaheim, that's all you really need. Now it's time for number 7, and for this time, I'm going to go with the Calgary Flames here. I see them taking a decent step back, 69 points in the end, and I think this is exactly where Calgary should be. I think we'll see another trade deadline where they end up selling some key pieces and eventually coming back down to earth even more. Hopefully, Calgary is in the best draft position possible. I think this would secure them a potential top 5 pick, which will be perfect for the Flames. They need to start rebuilding this core here, and I think this next year is the start of that retool. And last but not least, of course, we have the San Jose Sharks, so I think we'll also take a decent jump. Nothing insane, but 64 points, 65 around that range, I think is pretty reasonable. You, of course, have all the additions youth-wise in players like Celebrini and Will Smith, but also some offseason additions that were quite solid, like Toffoli, like Alexander Wenberg, who I think will be pretty underrated for them, especially Toffoli with Celebrini. Those two, I think, are going to be really solid together, but I still have some major question marks over that defense. Even if I do like the Jake Wallman addition, there is Cody Ceci as a first pair D, and I think goaltending-wise, you're still going to be rather mediocre. Even if Askarov comes in, I don't think he's going to light the world on fire immediately, but he will be a solid rookie if it does end up happening. Still, for San Jose, it's an obvious transitional period, and they get another top-end pick, which is exactly what they need. Now, we're going to get into the Central Division here in a second, but first I want to talk about today's sponsor in BetUS. If you guys don't know, right now they're doing a new promotion with the code YouTube150. You'll get an 150% bonus on your first deposit and 125% bonus on your next 2 deposits as well. But with BetUS coming up, especially when we're talking about divisions and who can win the Stanley Cup this year, they got so many options for every conference, for every division league, for the regular season trophies, as well as, of course, the Stanley Cup winner. So if you're feeling somebody specific like the Colorado Avalanche, you could go and put $5 down, win 55 by the end, and of course ride with your team there. So many options with BetUS, but it is the place to be for this hockey season. So join up if you haven't already, and thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. But now we move on to the Central Division, which compared to the Pacific has 5 different playoff teams that I see making it. To me, it is a way stronger division than what the Pacific has right now. In terms of depth, there's a lot here, but starting us out, I have my favorite team in the Dallas Stars getting around 106 points. I still have some major problems with this Stars team, not with the forward group because it is pretty fantastic from top to bottom, but defensively, I think they got worse than they were before when it already was a pretty big weakness and got eaten up versus Edmonton. You got Matt Dumba, Brendan Smith, Ilya Bushkin. I mean, you got some physicality there, but not much else. That, I think, will be the main weakness for the Stars this year in both the regular season and the playoffs. And I think could keep them from a President's Trophy and more playoff success. At number 2, though, this is a team that made some huge additions in this offseason. I think it will end up paying off for them. At the second place spot, I'm going to go here with the Nashville Predators, who will take another solid leap, this time going around at 102 points on the year. You're going to see some natural progression with the free agents they got, of course, in Jonathan Marchessault, Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea. I still think the defense is a little bit of weakness, but I think what will propel Nashville this year is how much better UC Saros is going to be and how I think he's going to have a career year. With this contract locked up, I think he's set for a huge season. He was a little bit pedestrian in the first half last year. Nashville was still able to make the playoffs and still able to have a successful season, even without that, which was incredible. But I think Saros is going to be in for a major season, potentially a Vezina Trophy winning year, and I think that's a big reason why Nashville will have so much success. Now getting into the third place spot here in the Central, this is one of my longtime bold predictions for this season, but I see this team doing so well this year. That is, of course, the Utah Hockey Club, who I see taking a big step and getting to 99 points this season. Now, you might be thinking how crazy it is to see this type of team make this type of jump, but there's a lot of reasons why I do have that. First, I think just relocating and being in this stable situation is going to energize these players quite a bit, especially the players that are signed long-term that want to be there in Utah. But you have an incredible forward group here, and I think a lot of these younger players are going to take steps. I think Keller's going to have an insane season, but that's on top of the younger players like Dylan Guenther, Logan Cooley taking a step, Lawson Krause, Matthias Michelli, Josh Doan. There's so much to like there. Defensively is where Arizona has really struggled as of late, but you really fix it quite a bit, getting Mikhail Sergachev, John Marino, and Ian Cole as some physical depth on the bottom pair. I think that's really going to add to their whole decor, and it's not going to make it the best in the world, but it's going to make it serviceable. And Connor Ingram was so underrated last year, so good and so consistent, and I think he's going to carry that over this year. So you combine the defensive improvements, the incredible forward group that'll just keep getting better with the youth there, and the goaltending that I think is quite underrated, and I think Utah's set in store here for a pretty solid year and a great first year in Utah. Now going on to a team that I've dogged on a little bit here and kind of made some bold predictions over whether they miss the playoffs or not, but thinking about it more, I think the Colorado Avalanche are going to be squarely in this position. Now, I don't think they're going to be top of the division in the Central, but I think they're going to be right there still in the playoffs. I think they could be a threat in missing it in the last couple weeks, but eventually we'll get it done. I have some big issues with the team depth-wise. You have players like Nikolai Kovalenko on your second line, which is really asking a lot from them, and the depth there in general, I think, is just a major weakness. But I think the top-end players, McKinnon, you're going to have Rantanen, and you could have Landeskog back as well, but you also have Casey Middlestad there in the forward group, and on defense, Devon Taves, Kyle McCarr, Gerard Manson, that's still an excellent top four, and I think they'll be good enough to make it. I think even in the cases where I have some concerns over Georgiev, I think Justus Annunen has been a really great player behind him, and at points has exceeded him, and I think he could exceed him this next year. So even though I have my concerns and my problems with the Avs, I still think the top end will be good enough in the regular season to get by. Now, a somewhat similar situation to Colorado, where I think the top end players are going to make this a playoff team. In the end, it was really tough between Winnipeg and St. Louis, but I'm going to go here with the Winnipeg Jets. I see them finishing with 94 points on the year and getting that second wildcard spot in the end. And here's the thing, when you compare these two teams, I actually really enjoy the additions by the Blues this offseason in players like Holloway and Broberg from Edmonton, but also depth additions like Matthew Joseph, and I think you also just look at that defense, and there's some room for improvement there with the youth coming in. I think for St. Louis, if they were to make the playoffs, it wouldn't surprise me. But I just think for Winnipeg, with the top end players they have, I think that'll be the main difference. I have some concerns over the depth, and especially defensively, I think that could be an issue. But Connor Hellebuyck's in the prime of his career. That Vezina Trophy campaign he had last year is not a fluke. He's been the most consistent goaltender over the past 5 years, and I think will continue to be. And I think Hellebuyck especially is the reason why I give the edge to Winnipeg here. But going on to the rest of the Central Division, at number 7, this is where I'm going to have the Minnesota Wild. I would like for Minnesota to have some success, but I just think in the Central Division, with how competitive it is, I just have the weaknesses there being too much for Minnesota to get over. For Minnesota, I think the supporting cast outside of Kaprizov and Boldy is still fairly weak. You have some players I like there, like Joel Eriksson Ek, and some underrated goal scoring there in him too, but outside of that, it's a lot of unproven commodities here. And on the defense, you will have Jared Spurgeon there fully healthy, which will be big, but the goaltending is a big weakness to me with how Gustafsson dropped back down. Hopefully he can bounce back, but I think for Minnesota, even with that, I think it's a big hill to climb over. At number 8 will be no surprise to anybody. That will be the Chicago Blackhawks, but I do see them making a decent improvement in the standings, 72 points, and compared to where they were last year, that's pretty good. It's mostly because of the Bedard's sophomore season getting even better, but mostly just the health throughout the roster, not just with Bedard, but players like Hall, and just throughout all the wing depth as well. I think it'll be a lot better this next year. Still not a good team yet, but eventually they will be. Now we move on to the Metro Division here in the Eastern Conference, and I have 4 wildcard teams in both the Metro and the Atlantic, but starting things out here, we're going to go to my President's Trophy winner for this next year. I have, again, the New York Rangers. Their offseason wasn't revolutionary or anything, but I think Riley Smith will be pretty interesting for them. I think it'll mostly just be the improvements in the top-end players like Adam Fox getting even better, hopefully improvements in players like Alexi Lafreniere as well, but I think the big improvement will be Igor Shesterkin playing so good, and he, of course, is in this contract negotiation with the Rangers. I think he's going to make it even more interesting by having maybe his best season of his career. We'll see. He'll be right up there, though, and I think think he's going to have a massive year coming up. A decent way down, though, at number 2, I'm going to go here with the New Jersey Devils. I think they'll make a pretty sizable improvement over the disaster that was 2024 for them. First, having an actual goaltender they can rely on in Jacob Markstrom is absolutely huge for him, and I think that'll make a big improvement just that alone. But I also like some of the additions around that lineup in Stefan Noesen, in Tomas Tatar being brought back, and Paul Cotter, and even on the defense too, Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon. They made some pretty big changes, but I think for the Devils, just the natural progression as well as hopefully, fingers crossed, better health, I think throughout the roster will be beneficial to them, and ultimately they'll be back in the playoffs where they belong. Now, another one kind of like LA that surprised me quite a bit when I was making this video, but at number 3 here, I'm going to go with the Washington Capitals. I think they're going to have a pretty solid season here and finish with 98 points. It's been touched to death how many additions the Caps made this offseason, but I think it was warranted considering how many additions they made and how many improvements they made. Logan Thompson being added as a backup to Lindgren, that tandem is going to be nasty. You look at the defense and the additions of Jacob Chychrun and Matt Roy, two guys who I think are great, especially in Roy's case, who I think has been heavily underrated by the Kings in the past. He's going to be in a great role there with the Caps. But you also have the additions on the offense, and German Giappani I think is going to be big for them. Pierre-Luc Dubois, as much as I like to clown on him with his time with LA and Winnipeg and everything, I think he'll actually rebound with Washington this time, though. We've said that the other times. We'll see what actually happens. I think for the Caps, though, considering their structure that they had already and the improvements they'll make defensively, they'll just become an even tighter team there, and I think they'll strangle teams to death. And with the goaltending there, I think they'll be able to accomplish it. But now at 4th place, the last team in the Metro that I see making the playoffs, tying with the Washington Capitals of 98 points. This is where I think the Carolina Hurricanes will end up finishing just barely at 4th place, but right there. This is just such a weird team to talk about because it feels like every year we're waiting for them to take that next step. I think they might take a little bit of a step back in the regular season and in general. I just feel like for the Canes, they're going in this perpetual mode of trying to do the same thing over and over again. They did change that defense a little bit, adding Sean Walker and having Shane Goss to spare, but I'm not sure if it's going to make too much of a difference. Goaltending wise, I'm still not confident in them being able to get the job done. And I think Freddie Anderson, with his age and everything, is starting to just have that wear and tear on him. We'll see if he actually is able to stay healthy throughout the whole course of the season. I'm hoping so. But their big offensive additions were Carrier and Jack Roslovic, and I just don't think for Carolina there's going to be much success there. Maybe there'll be a trade deadline edition or something again like they did with Jay Gensel, but as of right now, I'm not too confident. Now at number 5, this is where I see the New York Islanders ending up. I don't think they're going to be too far behind the Carolina Hurricanes, but I see them finishing with 92 points. They're always going to be right in the thick of it because of their structure and also because of Ilya Sorokin and how dominant he can be. But I do think for the Islanders, even though they'll be right in it, right in the race, I think they're going to come up short this time around, mostly just because of the competition in the Eastern Conference. They were able to make it this last year, but this next year, I think they'll be right outside. Now, taking a pretty decent jump this season, I see the Philadelphia Flyers being right there in the thick of it, getting 88 points on the year. Now, some people might say, why are you giving Philadelphia so many points? Well, they got 87 points last year, and now they're adding Matvei Michkov. You're going to have hopefully a full season of Jamie Drysdale, which I think will help him quite a bit. But you look at the lineup, and it's honestly not that bad, especially on the wing with players like Forrester, Konechny, of course, Michkov, Brink, Farabee, Owen Tippett. They have some pretty good options there, and I think we'll just see some progression in the youthful players there. Nothing incredible yet, but still, I think Tortorella is going to get the most out of this team. Coming up at number 7, man, I am just not excited to watch this Pittsburgh Penguins team. I mean, I think they're going to have some successes here and there, but I think they're going to regress again, going to 79 points. Their only additions were what? Cody Glass, Kevin Hayes. I mean, I feel like they could have used that cap space a little bit better for better players at least, but I think for the Penguins, they'll still be okay. They'll still have some good moments, but again, I think they're just going to come up short in the end. I think the defense has some holes. The offense, depth-wise, is still going to have some massive problems. I think a Blake Lizotte could be a surprise, but besides that, I think it's going to come up really short. Rutger McGrody could have a solid rookie season, but outside of that, I don't see there being much to really be hopeful for. At number 8, unfortunately, has to come the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think we will see a slight uptick in terms of points from last year, but not by much. It'll mostly be because of the youth progressing, guys like Adam Fantilli, Daniil Tarasov, to name a couple, but more of those guys being into the fold, I think, will make it better naturally. But you have the losses of Patrick Laine and, of course, the human loss of Johnny Gaudreau, which I think will affect them quite a bit. Hopefully, they're able to get a great season going for him. that's the least we could hope for. Now we move on here to the Atlantic Division, and this is kind of one that I think will be the most tight between every single division here. Maybe the Central could come close, but the Atlantic is going to be a bloodbath. Starting at the very top, though, I actually have a little bit of a surprise here. I think it's going to end up being the Boston Bruins. I see them getting 104 points on the year and just barely being number 1 in the Atlantic. Now, I haven't mentioned this before, but this video is assuming that all the top RFAs end up signing. So that includes, of course, Jeremy Swayman with Boston. That includes Lucas Raymond and Maurice Seider for Detroit. All the top RFAs consider them signed. And in Boston's case, if they already get Swayman signed here soon, I think they're going to have a pretty successful year. You have the addition of Lindholm and, of course, Zadorov onto the defense. Contract-wise, I don't like those deals, but in terms of the players, I think they'll be pretty good in terms of stylistic fits. You're still going to have the incredible play of David Pastrnak. We got a Matthew Poitras coming in, Mason Lowry for some more youth there. And I just think the defense and the systems there for Montgomery are just so solid, so good that they'll still be a successful team. Boston will make the playoffs or miss the playoffs when we're all dead. It's pretty much a guarantee. Coming just right behind them, though, this is where I see the Florida Panthers coming up at 103 points. Now, although I do see a little bit of a cup hangover, this is mostly just because of some of the losses that they've had, especially on the defense. I think they will rebound eventually, but you had some pretty big losses there. Now your bottom pair is Nate Schmidt and Adam Boquist, two guys that still have a lot to prove at this point in their careers. I think we could see Bobrovsky take a little bit of a step back as well. He was pretty fantastic last year all around, and I don't know if he's going to match that quite, but I think Florida's still going to have a great year, and 103 points, still one of the best teams in the league. And as we very well know with Florida right now, they turn it on in the playoffs too. That's their bread and butter for the regular season. As long as they make it, they're good. Now this is another big surprise for the video, but every single season has massive surprises, so I had to go for it. We got Utah, and next up at number 3, I'm going to go here with the Buffalo Sabres, who I see finishing with 99 points on the year, and finally making the playoffs. Now, I got torched last year for not really having a lot of faith in Buffalo, for saying that Levi was going to be inexperienced. The defense still has some issues for me. But I think because of just another season for Buffalo to get better with those youthful players, we're going to see them rebound, especially offensively here. Lindy Ruff, to me, is great at creating this atmosphere to start out and getting the most out of their players in year one. In Buffalo's case, I think he's going to be a great coach for them to start out, getting a lot of offense out of those top-end players like Paterka, Thompson, Tuck, Quinn, Cousins. There's a lot of great options there, but especially that bottom six was improved in the speed, the physicality, and players like Nicholas Aube-Kubel, Sam Lafferty, and Brian McLeod, who I think is going to be huge for them. The defense, I still have some concerns over, but I think Byram having a full season with them is going to be big. Owen Power, I think, is going to rebound. Matthias Samuelsson will hopefully be healthy, and I think now that you have Luukkonen and his second half strength, now Levi can be a little bit more comfortable to come into the fold this year, and I think he's going to have a great season. I think for Buffalo, in a lot of ways, they're set up for success, and hopefully they finally are able to do this thing. Now, at number 4, that leaves one more playoff team in the Eastern Conference, and at a 4th place spot, I'm going to go here with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Kind of like the Boston Bruins. I think they're going to make the win in the playoffs somehow, some way. For the Leafs, though, I think it will be a little bit of a step back in ways, but still, they'll be in the playoffs, and that's what matters. Now, I think we will see the Leafs actually improve defensively. Chris Tanev, I think, is a big addition for them. Oliver Ekman-Larsson was great for Florida last year, and I do think Joseph Woll, coming into this year, hopefully he'll finally be the starter that they need. Otherwise, Stolarz has proved to be a pretty solid backup recently, and I think he can be up to the task if Woll has some struggles. My big concern, though, is the depth on the wings. Right wing is okay, but you look at the left wing, man, and there's almost nothing. You got Robertson, Dewar, Holmberg, McCann, a lot of maybes, a lot of okays, and I just think for Toronto, that offensive depth on the wing might be a little bit lacking, and I think that is something that could hold them back. Still, though, I think they're going to have a good year, and the top-end guys in Matthews and Marner, regular season-wise, we know what they can do. They'll still be set. Now, coming at the 5th place spot and just outside the playoffs by 1 point, literally, I'm going to have the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, I honestly didn't hate their offseason. Jake Gensel is a pretty massive addition, and in the Sergachev trade, I don't think they did fantastic in terms of NHL players now, but it is what it is. I get why they made that deal. I think the big reason why Tampa misses is mostly just because of the age here. In Stamkos' case, now leaving, that's a big loss there, and the leadership and the core of that team. And Victor Hedman, I think, has been pretty rapidly declining. I think it's just going to happen for another straight season. And I look at that defense, and they reacquired Ryan McDonough, but he's also on the decline. And I just look throughout, and there are some massive holes there. A lot of maybes, a lot of players that could play up to the level they need to, but they need to be brilliant. And considering the lack of right wing depth and much depth at all on the wings, and just the inconsistencies in the defense, I think in that crazy Atlantic division, they might get swept up a little bit. Then we got a number 6 right behind the Tampa Bay Lightning will be the Detroit Red Wings. I see them making slight progress, but only by a couple of points, unfortunately. This is even factoring both Raymond and Seider being signed for training camps. If one of those guys are gone for a significant amount of time, I think Detroit's chances are basically done. You have some additions from the offseason like Tarasenko, and on the defense, I mean, an Eric Gustafsson, I guess, but I still have major concerns over the top end scoring there besides Larkin, besides DeBrincat. You have the depth in the wings, which is very strange, and defensively, you have your top end players with Seider outside of him and Sherrod and Petrie and players like Justin Hall, and I just don't have confidence in that defense being able to rise above. And then you got the goaltending in Talbot, Lyon, and Husso, and I like Alex Lyon, but he was having to carry Detroit's goaltending last year, and you could see how it was tearing against him. I just feel like for Detroit, they're in this weird spot where they could have made so much progress by now, but some of these weird decisions and additions, I think, will end up subtracting them in the end. Now, taking a little bit more of a jump than the Detroit Red Wings, I will have the Ottawa Senators, not in terms of position in the Atlantic, but in terms of actual points, I see them taking a decent jump, 87 points on the year, mostly due to Linus Ullmark. I really did like the additions of David Perron and Michael Amadio, and I think the four-group is a lot better for it, but the question marks on defense, I think are still there. Nick Jensen is a fine addition, but I think you're asking a lot of players like Shabbat to be healthier than they've been before, and I think for Ottawa, they're going to be right up there. They're going to be making some big improvements, but I don't know if it's quite enough to make the playoffs. It's really unfortunate because if they were in the Pacific Division, I'd be ready to call them a playoff team right now. And of course, finishing us off at number 8 here, I'm going to have the Montreal Canadiens. It's no slight to the Habs and the improvements they'll make, but I just think in that Atlantic Division, points are going to be pretty hard to come by. I still see them making an improvement, though, at 79 points, but the offense taking a big jump and players like Laine being there full-time, hopefully Kirby Dach having a fully healthy season. There will be some improvements here, but I think 2026 is when you're going to start to see the standings improvements there for the Habs. Now, we went through some of the regular season predictions, but for a nice little bonus, I want to go through some of the playoff predictions as well. Fast forwarding to the Western Conference Final and the Eastern Conference Final. For the West, I have Edmonton versus Nashville. I think for the Oilers, even though they still have some holes here, I think their just core group there is too good and will overwhelm a lot of the teams they come across. I also have the Nashville Predators coming out of the Central Division, and I would love to call my Stars the team coming out of it, but I just think some of the defensive issues will come to bite them in the back. Compared to Nashville, I think the goaltending is going to be a major strength. I think the additions that they make in the youth there on the depth will be huge for them. I don't think they're going to get past Edmonton, as you can see here, but I think Nashville will be in that type of spot. In the East, I have a rematch between Florida and the New York Rangers, but this time I have the Rangers getting past the Panthers. I think this is mostly going to be because of Igor Shesterkin. I think this is his year to dominate, not just in the regular season, but in the playoffs and to have a full, incredible year. I think it's the main reason why I have the Rangers past Florida and will eventually be the Stanley Cup winners, or the Stanley Cup runner-up to the Oilers, who I think will eventually win in 6 games past the Rangers. To me, this is a cup final that we could have easily seen this last year, but I think this next year makes a lot of sense. You could go either way, and maybe Shesterkin is able to carry on that finals run, but I see him having kind of a Bobrovsky 2023, where he's unbelievable up until the Stanley Cup final, where McDavid and his crew overwhelmed them in the end. But those are my predictions for the 2025 NHL season, and if you guys did enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe, and hit that notification bell down below. I'd love to know your thoughts down below on how many points you see your team getting in the end, and if you see them being a playoff team as well, let me know. And of course, make sure you debate as carefully and as happily as you guys can. I know we're talking about playoffs here, but be as courteous as you can, people in the comments, please. We'll try to have a nice public debate, okay? But I will see you in the next one, folks. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Click on this card for all of my hockey predictions, Talk Random One playlist, and thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. I will see you guys in the next one, though, and have a great hockey day. Goodbye.